What's going on? Adam here in the house. We have a special guest interview for you today. One of our local legend DJs and producers, Luis Martinez. Luis is known for his incredible house sets. He has been a record artist with Billboard Dance, Island Records, Campo Alegre Productions, just to name a few. He was a DJ, producer, remixer at Bullet Dodge Records and EPM Music. Currently, he's a resident DJ at Saigon Blonde St. Pete's, one of my favorite spots. And let's not forget his live Sunday sets, which can be heard on Mix 93 FM online. In this special guest interview, I had the pleasure of speaking with Luis about his early days as a DJ beginning in New York, his experience as a producer, the international travels as he got to experience as a DJ, and a deep dive into the creation of his EP coming out at the end of this month. So keep a lookout. Without further ado, Luis Martinez. Luis, so let's get into it. I want to start by asking you a little bit about your background. Where are you from originally?
Born and raised in New York. I was born in Long Island, Brentwood, Long Island, Bayshore, Long Island, actually. And grew up there and migrated to Manhattan and finished high school and pretty much stayed in Manhattan for a while. Went back to New York, went back to Long Island and met this dude that was a big promoter in this rave scene. So I was curious because I was a DJ at the time. We're talking, this was 1990. I started in 85. So this is 90, 91, just when the rave scene was just touching,
Yeah.
And and he took me into this club in Long Island called Caffeine, and I was like, wow! I couldn't believe it. I was like, wait, a place like this on Long Island, normally I'm going to the Limelight and stuff for this, So I got to know everybody there, and they brought me in, and it took off right from there. 91, I went to recording engineering school, and did that for 4 years and got the master's. And then I started traveling with the rave scene with Oliver Way. He was a big booking agent back in London, back in the in the 80s and 90s. Now he owns his own record label, but he took me under his wing, and I traveled to 14 different countries around the world, and with a lot of heavy hitters. That's how I met all the big guys. Frankie Bones and Frankie Knuckles. And my main influence was back then in '85. My influence back was more like freestyle and rap music. It wasn't hip hop yet, But then once house music hit, that was it. Me with being a Latin background, I had a lot of Latin jazz influences, and salsa and all that. So the house music automatically just molded. So I just took it from there and been doing it ever since. I moved down to Florida back in 2000, and thinking I was going to take a break from it, and that didn't happen. Within three months of being here, I was already a resident in Ybor City in Tampa, and radio station, radio shows, and just been producing music since 96. I had my first release in 97, and I've been just doing it ever since. Here I am.
Yeah, very nice. Sounds like you have a very deep background getting into it in the original stages when everything was getting up and going. So that's a very unique perspective from where you're at and from where a lot of us see it now. I mean, we've seen maybe the third layer of it at this point.
Right.
So
back then it was really like you would have to know the person to know the address to this location. And most of the time in Long Island, there was a lot of industrial parks and a huge amount of abandoned warehouses. I'm talking that been abandoned for 8-10 years. You have to mow the lawn and then cut your way through the brush to get to the building. And we'd break into those things, and we'd have raves there with Frankie Bones, Adam X. I mean, you name it. People would just come. We'd play for free, and that's how we all got together. And back then, it was a joint effort,
Yeah, absolutely. It was at that point, it seems that the DJ equipment
was still even early in its
Yeah.
infancy at that time, and to be creating those, rich sounds even at that time is just incredible to put that together
Oh
with
yeah.
that kind of equipment.
Yeah. Nowadays you have everything's computer based. Back when I started, everything was a lot of stuff was on reel to reel still. So when you're doing edits on a computer, you could see the wave and you could take a pair of scissors and cut it and match it, and it would be straight on beat because you're on a computer. Back in the days, you would have what's called an edit block, and you have your reel to reel on this block, and you're there with a razor blade and scotch tape, and you're moving the tape, and you hear the snare you want. You're gonna cut it, you're gonna take it out, you're gonna move it onto another piece of tape, you're gonna tape it onto that, and you would hopefully it'd be on beat. That's how production was. So to make a drop with a build up nowadays can take you 10 minutes.
Exactly.
Back then it would be 16 hours. It's just, yeah, you need deep in pieces of reel to reel tape.
At the core of electronic music during that time, and the history of it goes, it's an incorporation of Latin music, going into like African music from Africa.
Mm-hmm.
And the base of that music are instrumental.
When it came to house music, it really derived from disco.
Okay.
So back in the disco days, you had a live band playing in the studio. Nothing was sequenced, so, but there was still that four on the floor. You always had that boom, boom, boom. That's why people hated disco. You know what I mean? Now people hate house music because it does the same thing all the time, until you really sit with it and listen to what's in between, But that was a big factor. The live instruments started becoming drum machines, and it was very MIDI based, and that's why I use the same software here that I used back in the 80s, because it was all MIDI based. It wasn't audio, so everything was sequenced with outboard keyboards, and people would play them, and you would be able to sequence that data. It wouldn't come up on your screen on the computer as a waveform. It would be a little bunch of dots. So you'd be able to line them up and call it what's quantized to lock them together. And that's what evolved with the electronic music. That's when you had your Taylor Dane and Paul Abdul days, and that was all drum machine based, and MIDI based with reel to reels, recording the vocals. So now everything is all computers. I mean, that's all forgotten, reel to reels, ADATs, all that's forgotten nowadays. Everything's just like we're doing a podcast right here. It's all digital. We're not recording nothing on a physical tape, So now we can do whatever we want with this once it's done,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we were just talking about having a computer in our hands right now. I'm sitting here with my iPhone.
With the phone.
We're, getting ready to put this together, and I'm sitting here with the computer in my hand. It's amazing. Now, you mentioned that you had gone to school for music. I mean, right after school, you had been introduced to, the house scene by a few individuals that kind of brought you in. What was your inspiration prior, to going to school for music?
It was always in my family. I have a great uncle who plays a 12-string acoustic. His name is Yomo Toro, and he played with every famous Latin artist pretty much in the world for the past 35, 40 years. So he's always been a big influence.
Wow. Yeah, same here, actually. My grandfather was a guitarist. My father is a guitarist. My father's an artist. We have a lot of artists in my family, and a lot of them are musicians. And I remember from an early age, I mean, I had to have been 5 years old, and they pulled out a guitar, a guitar straight bought out of Juarez, Mexico, off of the street. I mean, this thing was just rugged, but my grandfather was able to just pluck a few notes out of that, and my mind was blown.
Yeah.
From that point,
I want to do that.
Yeah, I really, that was my inspiration at an early age to play guitar, and that was my introduction to music.
Yeah, same thing with me. It was the instruments. Yeah.
Yeah. So you had been introduced to it to the house scene, and then brought in by a few people in the industry. At what point did you start DJing?
It's in high school. I went to high school with Eric Sermon from EPMD and Biz Marquis and Keith Murray and a lot of hip hop artists I went to high school with, and we used to do a lot of high school parties, homecomings and house parties all together. And Diamond J, we all went to high school together. Diamond J, DJ 405, who's Lil Wayne's DJ right now.
Okay.
So these guys have, been in the game since high school. And I went to a party one time and I was watching how they would just took control of the crowd, and I was like, I want to do that, So yeah, that's what did it. But for me, it was more. I was doing the Run DMC thing and all that back then,
Okay.
But then I as soon as freestyle came out, that's when I started playing with because it was more like a breakbeat type thing. It had the Latin flavor in it and stuff. So I went to that, and then of course house came into the scene, and that took over. But my first actual show was when I got in tune with the guys at Caffeine. They would always book big names. I mean, Carl Cox played there. It's big names, just like
Wow.
just like the Limelight and Palladium back in New York. All those big clubs that had those major headliners and stuff were playing at this place, this little warehouse. It was an ice factory. It was a warehouse split into two parts, and I played the main room there, and they put me on at 5 a.m. Place didn't close until 8, and when I've never stayed there that late because I was always thinking clubs close early, so I do my thing and leave about 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning, but normally clubs would close at 4 o'clock. This place stayed open at 8. So when they told me that I was playing that late, I was like, man, there's nobody going to be there,
Yeah.
Man, you kidding me? That place had a line around the building at 3:30 in the morning. So it was, very nerve wracking, but what an experience. I totally got thrown into the wolves on that one.
Yeah. I mean, I'm still thinking that who's going to be here at 3 o'clock?
Yeah.
We got an interesting community with this, in the house scene. That's for sure.
Yeah. Like for instance, this tomorrow I have a gig at 1 o'clock in the morning. Normally that would be prime time because the clubs close at 3 o'clock, but this place doesn't close until 8. So there's nobody going to be there at 1 o'clock in the morning. So, you know what I mean? So
Wow. So you started producing, at some point.
yeah, I started the production thing. I went to I was doing a wedding, and this guy came up to me. He was a cop, and he said, "Listen, I have a wedding coming up. I need a DJ. Why don't you come by my house for the details?" So I go to his house. He lived, not far from me. Go to his basement. Dude has a full-fledged recording studio in his house. I mean, huge mixing board. I was like, whoa, So it got to the point where I said, listen, I want to learn this. I want to really get into this. And he's the guy who encouraged me to go to school for it. So he said, listen, I'll give you 10 hours of studio time. You do this wedding for me. That was it. So I was hooked. So he started teaching me the ropes. So when I went to school, I had a little bit of a head start, and that's how I breezed right through it. It was really, really fun. Then the record labels came in. It took a while. Of course, you do trial and error just coming out of school. You still don't really, you know how to produce music, but you don't know how it's produced nowadays. So you always have to keep with the trends. You always have to understand that that if you try to listen to your own drum, not everybody's going to listen with you,
Yeah, absolutely. So you got a pretty extensive background when it comes to producing. You're a resident DJ, Saigon Blonde now.
Mm-hmm.
You've been an artist at Crescent Records, Crescent Records, at Funk Junk Music Group, a record artist at Campo Allegra Productions. The list goes on. As a producer, like, what is the production process like in moving from just being a house DJ, a DJ at events, to producing?
Well, going from being a DJ to a producer, good DJs make great producers. So with that being said, you kind of had some sort of music theory going on because of your timing and key structuring and stuff, mixing in key. If you're a real DJ, you know how to mix, so with that being said, how a song should be structured, especially being DJ friendly, and radio edits. Radio edits are shorter, and DJ friendly are have an intro and an outro for mixing in and out. So it's really intricate. but it's fun. It's a lot of fun because you have all this power at your fingertips. When you're DJing, you have power of two different songs, or three or four different songs,
Yeah.
but they're not yours. You're
Yeah.
making your own, and music can't be made; it has to be felt. So
Absolutely.
so with that being said, yeah, of course you have to have the talent, of course, but these days it's made really easy for you, so you're able to shine a lot easier than it was back in the day. You know, I had the opportunity to work with a lot of artists that brought me under their wing and showed me a lot of the tricks of the trades and stuff instead of me having to learn by myself. So those were really good experience with all these different labels that I'm with, because everybody has a different way of doing things, and you can figure things out and do tricks. And because when you're listening to songs nowadays, you go, oh man, how did they do that? How did that happen? You try to figure it out. You rewind it, going back, and eventually you figure it out. But I've had the opportunity to learn offhand quick on how it's done, so I was able to save time on that. Sometimes it takes years.
Absolutely, and I'm sure that background, the educational background was a big help. Sounds like you had a really good base of people to collaborate with throughout the years. Yeah, so you even traveled over abroad playing some shows. What was that like?
Yeah, my first gig was Ministry of Sound in London.
Wow.
Dude,
Yeah.
I went to the booking agent Oliver. He used to live in Long Island, and he moved from London to Long Island, and he had a little magazine, and that's why I met him at Caffeine.
Mm-hmm.
So he still had all of his connections and stuff, and he lived out here out in New York for about 6 years, and he moved back up to London to open up his record label and his management service. So he started booking me for shows that he was throwing, and from there other booking agents were picking me up, but he was the main guy that everyone had to go through, because that's how it was. Back then, booking agents did all the legwork for you. They would go out and find the gigs for you and get you the top dollar. Nowadays, booking agents don't do that. You have to be too busy to handle them yourselves. Then you have to hire a booking agent. They don't look for you anymore. So he was back then. He was the guy who would get me these gigs. And yeah, the first one was at Ministry of Sound. And then I went to France, Italy, Tokyo, Japan, Rio de Janeiro, Mexico,
There we go.
all over the States.
Absolutely. It would have been an incredible experience.
Oh yeah.
I mean, we can, as a DJ, and DJs out there listening to this, we can only imagine what that experience would be like, as an artist, as an experience to, play these different clubs, see the different crowds, and
Yeah.
I'd imagine the crowds are the same everywhere you go because you're playing for people.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah,
I'm sure
certain places you find have a certain appreciation for it. Stronger than others.
Okay.
Not that it means not that it's bad, not that it's bad, but you definitely see a difference in some places.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
yeah, a different way of maybe expressing their
Mm-hmm.
their appreciation for the music,
Mhm.
and I'd imagine, yeah, some people were just kind of a little bit more chill on the dance floor, and hell, you probably go to somewhere like Germany and people are just going
Oh, yeah.
nuts on the dance floor, right?
Munich, Germany. I went to Munich, Germany, and this was 94. And it was very hard house back then. You're talking
Mhm.
at 132 beats per minute.
So what was the name of the club?
I don't remember the name of the club. It was a haze.
Yeah.
But those were the types of clubs that would hold thousands of people. And I remember places like that, of course, is a whole different vibe because it just sounds like a stadium in the place. But you would see the way the music would travel through the crowd by the way they would dance. It just looks like a wave, an ocean wave just going through the crowd. Through the music would take you would see it on beat right in front of you, people dancing on beat, but then you look way back and it could be a second delay by the time it gets to them, and you can see by the way they're dancing. It's really cool, really cool.
Very cool. Yeah, and I would imagine, you're playing your music. I mean, you're playing all the music you've been collecting that week, the week before, and you finally get to see it live. And on top of that, you have your own music that you've produced. What is that like, hearing you're playing your own produced music for the crowd?
Oh, it's awesome. Yeah, especially when you do it for the first time. You're nervous, but it's awesome. It's definitely awesome because when you're producing a track, you already know, how they're gonna react. So you can't wait to get it on the dance floor.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's a great feeling. Definitely a great feeling. And again, like today, a lot of these millennials, they unfortunately, the way the radio is now, a lot of these guys and girls are brainwashed. They don't listen to music like we do in the house scene.
Right.
We listen to a song that takes you for a journey. These guys, they're listening to the radio, and the first verse is over, and they're done. They're switching the song. So things have really changed nowadays. So you have to really, it's hard. It's hard, man. It's so hard the way the industry is nowadays. It's.
I feel you.
Yeah, it's tough.
I feel you. So, Luis, you have an EP coming out. Let's talk about that. What was the influence for this EP?
Well, I figured, I was I was thumbing through my records, and I'm going through a lot of old disco songs and stuff that I've collected over the years, and a lot of one-hit wonders. And nowadays, when people are remixing these old disco tracks, it's called new disco. So I had picked up this one, and it was called Back to My Roots, and it fit perfect because nowadays all I'm really producing is a lot of what's on today. I haven't really stepped back and gone back to the way I used to produce music with a little bit of soul to it.
Yeah. And
disco has that. So this EP, I did 2 songs. One is a Roberta Flack song, Back Together Again.
Mm-hmm.
I remixed that. That's going to be on the EP. And then the other one is called Back to My Roots. That's the name of the EP. That EP is sick.
Very nice. Yeah, Roberta Flack, I mean, what an incredible artist. She's had a lot of #1 singles.
Oh,
The First Time Ever I Saw Your Face was a big one.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing like taking something that's over 30 years old and putting a new twist to it, especially with the power that you have on the computer these days. You can take things apart and change the way they're actually singing the song, so it's really like all that power at your fingertips. You can get really creative, so I definitely hit this one out the park.
Very nice.
That, my friends, was Luis Martinez. I want to thank you all for listening. We're going to have more special guest interviews for you all, so keep an eye out. I'm going to close with a sound bit from Luis's new EP, Back to My Roots. Enjoy, and catch you next time.